I'll never forget that night. They say it's just a story, a prank, something teenagers whisper about every year. But I'm here to tell you, it's not a joke, it's real. And I was almost next. Every year at the Harvest of Horror, one girl goes missing. People don't seem to care. The police dismiss it as teenage rebellion, and the town, small and insular, turns a blind eye. It's just one girl, right? I wish I could believe that. I wish I never agreed to go. But Jacob, my boyfriend, the man I'd trusted since our freshman year of college, was from that town. To him, the festival was fun, nostalgic even. When he suggested we go, I didn't hesitate. After all, this was Jacob, the one person I could always count on. He'd always been the protector in our relationship, the safe harbor. So when he said, "Let's go to the Harvest of Horror, Mia. It'll be great," I trusted him. The festival was everything you'd expect from a small-town Halloween fair. Haunted houses, flickering lanterns, and people dressed as ghouls. But there was something off about the place. The way the shadows moved in the dark, the way the cornfields seemed to swallow the light, the wind whispered through the stalls like it was carrying a secret. Jacob laughed it off, though. Every time I expressed the slightest unease, he'd smile and say, "It's just a festival, Mia. You're letting the stories get to you." And I'd nod, forcing a smile. I didn't want to be the one who ruined the fun. But the stories, I couldn't shake them. The whispers about the missing girls, how one vanishes every year, never to return. I wanted to believe it was all a legend, but something deep down told me otherwise. It wasn't until we entered the Maze of Dread that my doubts began to harden into fear. The cornstalks were taller than I expected, blocking out the sky. The paths twisted and turned, swallowing us in darkness. The actors who jumped out from the shadows didn't scare me. It was the silence that followed. We seemed to be the only ones inside. The laughter and screams from the festival grew distant until they vanished completely. And then, we saw him. A figure stood at the end of the path. He wore a mask, stitched together, grotesque, with hollow, lifeless eyes. In his hand, he held a scythe. At first, I thought he was part of the show, just another actor playing his part. But he didn't move. He just stood there, staring. I whispered, "Jacob, is that part of the maze?" Jacob hesitated. His usual confidence faltered. "Yeah, probably." But something in his voice told me he wasn't sure. We turned to leave, but as we made our way down another path, the figure appeared again, closer this time, watching us with the same eerie stillness. My pulse quickened. It felt wrong, like we were being hunted. "Jacob, we need to get out of here," I said, my voice barely audible. He didn't argue. We started to walk faster, but no matter which way we turned, the figure was always there, silently following us. The scythe scraping the ground behind him sent chills down my spine. And then we stumbled into a clearing. In the center was a decrepit shack, its walls crumbling, the wood rotten. Jacob pulled me toward it. "Let's hide in here," he said. "No," I resisted, panic rising in my throat. "We need to get out of this maze, Jacob. This isn't right." But he didn't listen. He opened the door and pushed me inside, slamming it shut behind us. The shack was cold, musty, and far too quiet. I glanced around, trying to steady my breath, when my eyes landed on an old mirror hanging crooked on the wall. It was cracked, covered in a layer of dust. I stepped closer, wiping away the grime. And then I saw it, him. The masked man was standing behind me in the reflection, his empty eyes locked on mine. I screamed and spun around, but the room was empty. I was alone with Jacob. "Mia, you're just seeing things," Jacob said calmly, his voice unnervingly steady. But I knew what I saw. Before I could argue, the door creaked open, and there he was, the masked man standing in the doorway, his scythe gleaming in the dim light. Jacob froze, and for the first time all night, I saw real fear in his eyes. "Jacob, what's happening?" I whispered. He didn't answer. Instead, he grabbed my hand, pulling me toward the door. We ran, sprinting through the maze, but no matter how fast we went, the masked man was always there, silent, relentless, his footsteps never far behind. By some miracle, we eventually found our way out of the maze. We burst back into the festival grounds, gasping for breath, our clothes torn and dirty. The crowd around us continued to laugh and enjoy the night, completely unaware of what we'd just gone through. Jacob didn't say a word. He wouldn't look at me. The next morning, another girl went missing. I knew, in my gut, that Jacob was hiding something dark, something he wasn't telling me. But when I pressed him, he brushed me off. We didn't talk about it again. A few months later, our relationship fell apart. The silence between us had grown too loud, too full of unanswered questions. We ended things quietly, without much drama. It wasn't the festival, not really, but it was the wedge that drove us apart. One afternoon, while cleaning out the apartment we once shared, I stumbled upon something hidden in the back of a cabinet, beneath some old sheets. It was a photograph, one I'd never seen before. My heart dropped as I pulled it out. It was a picture of me, but something was terribly wrong. My eyes had been crossed out, vandalized. I flipped the photo over, and on the back, written in a shaky hand, were the words, "But I love her so much." The word "buh" lingered in my head like a haunting echo. But I love her so much. It was as if the message was meant to justify something terrible. I stared at the photo for a long time, the air growing thick with dread. That night in the maze, all the pieces started to fall into place. The masked figure, the fear in Jacob's eyes. It wasn't just a game. Jacob wasn't scared of the man following us. He was scared I'd find out the truth. The missing girls, the festival. Jacob had been
part of it all along.